the broadcast using the same link you used initially. This is also the first step if you have any issues with your audio or polling questions. And hopefully you guys can hear me all okay. Just let me know if I'm speaking too softly. Today's AGM will be recorded and made available to all registrants and stakeholders that are unable to attend today. All right, next slide, please. Before moving forward with the business meeting, I'd like to introduce you to the NSC MIRTP Board of Directors, myself, Chrissy Gamache, Chair, Kenny Zan, Vice Chair, Nancy Duggan, Secretary, Jason Shepard, Member at Large, Lisa Bonin, Member at Large, Rebecca Jessam, Member at Large, Ann Mann, Public Member, Hamad Mohiuddin, Public Member, and Nick Burke, Public Member. I'd also like to introduce you to NSC MIRTP staff, Julie Avery, our Executive Director and Registrar, Jacqueline Metzler, Deputy Registrar, and Joanne Jones, our admin staff, who is also acting as moderator today. Also present at today's meeting are Ryan Baxter, who's our legal representative from McGuinness Cooper, and Monita Taylor from MNP, who conducted our financial audit, and she will be presenting their findings today. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us. I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution of past presidents of NSAMRT, NSSDMS, and past chairs of the college who have joined us today. So today we have Bert Langell, Karen Fader, and Megan Bryden. Welcome, and thank you for your continued support and dedication. If I've missed any past president or chair of any of these three organizations, please let us know through the question box so that you can be recognized. Last but certainly not least, I recognize the valuable contribution of our many college volunteers who work on various committees and work groups, and without whom we would not be able to accomplish our initiatives. So thank you. Joanne, are there any additional past presidents to recognize?
No, there aren't.
Okay. All right. We'll be using a polling app today to vote on motions during the AGM. We have a test question to get us started. Joanne, can you please make the first poll live? Everyone, please answer the question and hit submit when it appears on your screen. And this is a good time for a reminder that only active NSC MIRTP registrants can vote. And unfortunately, this does not include our student members. We'll just pause here until everyone votes and we'll display the results.
Okay, I'm going to close it now. Share.
Amazing.
Okay.
This is also a good time to remind that the panelists can't respond to the voting. They'll have to just type their answers into the chat box. Is that correct? I feel like that's correct. You definitely didn't vote that time. All right. Some of us may be attending today's meeting in a group. If you are attending today's AGM as part of a group, meaning there are 2 or more of you watching on a single login, please delegate a scrutineer for your group now. And can that identified person please go ahead and type in the question area your full name and total number of voting college registrants that are present in your group. This is the hardest part about virtual stuff, waiting. Does it look like there's any groups today?
I do have some groups. Do you want me to name them, or are we just taking note?
I'm just taking note. So for these groups, because you'll have the numbers of how many are in each group. For these group, each time a poll goes live, we ask that the scrutineer not answer the poll directly, but instead type into the question box the number of yes votes and the number of no votes for your group. So that's a lot of work for you, but hopefully it's a small group. Any questions about that, just type in the question box as well, okay? All right, we now need to confirm a quorum of registrants. Joanne, can you please make the next poll live? So this is where the panelists, if you're a registrant, will vote.
Okay, I'm going to close the vote now.
Amazing. And since we have 116 online now, I'm assuming that means we have quorum.
So 77% voted.
Okay. I can't do math. But I think we have quorum. That's more than we normally have, so. Okay, so moving along, 2.0. The contents of the annual report were posted to the NSC MIRTP website on May 10th of this year, and it was also sent to registrants via an e-blast on the same day. This report can also be found today in the Handouts tab near the question box to the right of your screen. The annual report provides all the reference material you need for this meeting. So let's begin with the agenda, which is located on page 3. Do I have a mover to accept the agenda for the 3rd annual general meeting?
Yep, this is Kenny. I move to accept the agenda.
Awesome, thank you, Kenny. Is there a seconder?
It's Lisa. I second the motion.
Perfect. It is moved and seconded to approve the agenda of the 3rd annual general meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda? If so, please submit any of these on the question function. And we'll pause again. All right, hearing no questions on the agenda or additions or corrections. Joanne, can you please launch the next voting poll? The question is to approve the agenda for the 3rd annual general meeting. Everyone, please vote once the poll appears on your screen. If you're having trouble voting, try hitting the escape and exiting out of full screen mode. Sometimes that helps.
Okay, I'm going to close it now. Here you go.
Amazing. Motion passed. All right, 3.0. Minutes of the 2nd annual general meeting, which is in the appendix, page 25. Is there a mover to accept the minutes of the 2nd AGM?
This is Kenny again. I'll move that motion.
Excellent, thank you, Kenny. Is there a seconder?
It's Lisa. I second the motion.
Amazing, thanks, Lisa. It is moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the 2nd annual general meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If so, please submit these corrections via the question function. We'll pause a little bit for this as well. Just out of curiosity, Joanne, I'm just curious how many are in groups? Like,
Well, I think we've just got the one group, because we've got one group with one name in and then another group with 1, 2, 3 names in. So I think that must have just been same person. So there's 4
okay. Because
people.
I was recently talking to someone about how we're really good at turning these education events and important meetings just on in like the lunchroom and stuff, and all like watching them during lunch. I think that's really, it's really good of us. No questions or corrections on the minutes?
Nope.
Excellent. Can you please launch the next voting poll? The question is to approve the minutes of the second annual general meeting. Everyone please vote when it comes up on your screen.
Okay, I'm going to close that.
Amazing. Motion passed. All right, moving along, 4.0, business arising. Is there any discussion of business arising from the minutes of last year's meeting? If you have any questions or discussion based on the minutes, please type them into the question box now. Right, hearing no questions.
Yeah, no questions.
Excellent. I now invite Julie Avery, our Executive Director and Registrar, to provide a brief report on the past year and a glimpse of what you can expect this year. Julie?
Thank you, Christy. Each year we like to take this opportunity to share the work of the college over the past year. We center our work around 2 strategic pillars this year. That includes stakeholder awareness and effective governance. Specifically under stakeholder awareness, we're looking at communicating with the public, our communication plan, and communication with stakeholders. And under effective governance, we're particularly concerned with how our committees are functioning and how our board is functioning. Looking at the first one, public awareness, through 2022, the strategic initiatives were to work on our communication plan and public awareness. So we did hire a PR firm, and we've also done an assessment of our current communication and how we conduct it and ways to improve it. The PR firm has helped us with that as well. We've done a development of communication plan and a social media planner, and we've also developed some communication materials. These are now through 2023 in the process of being operationalized. So we've hired a summer student, a PR summer student, to actually operationalize some of the initiatives for 2022, which would include that social media planner and some of our communication material. We're hoping to have some rollout in the next couple of months, and we also are hoping to do some board and chair and executive director PR training this year. In the near future, you should be receiving a website usability survey. We've developed that just recently. We're going to send that out to both public and the registrant pool to look at the usability of our website and to identify areas where we can improve it and hopefully have those improvements in place by the end of the year. Around the social media, just to give you an example of some of the work that has been done, these images we're hoping to actually put on rotating silent screens in physician's office later this year. So again, just to get some information out about what the college is and what we do, and put it out to the public to help build awareness amongst the public who we are and what we do. And we were thinking doctors' offices would be an excellent place because you tend to have a captive audience who are looking for something to read and do while waiting for their appointments. The next area we want to look at is communication with registrants. This year we did, in 2022, we finished the jurisprudence package, and that was actually just rolled out in March of this year. So now applicants who apply to the college need to do a jurisprudence module. This module is intended to ensure that anyone coming to practice in Nova Scotia knows what rules and laws govern their practice. It is what we would call a high importance, low stakes module. So it's very important that anyone practicing knows the laws that govern them. However, we don't want this to be a barrier to anyone to actually licensing. So once you've done the module, there's questions you have to answer. And if you don't get enough of the answers right, you just go back and repeat it until you do get enough of them right. So the importance is that the knowledge is attained, not that you do it the first bat, get it off at the first bat. Site visits, we still really like site visits, going into the departments and just having informal discussions with the technologists and therapists. However, in Nova Scotia, the clinical sites are still restricted for unnecessary visitation, so we have not yet been able to get back to doing that. We've also created renewal and registration guidebooks. If you go, an applicant coming in and looking at the website, there's directions on the website, but in addition to that, there's actually a link to renewal and registration guidebooks in there as well. And they actually do step-by-step registration process or renewal process. So the renewal guidebook is updated each year. And again, that's as well on the page to remind you about renewals. And it will literally walk you through the entire process with images as well to navigate the platform in case you have any questions. Refresher programs were completed in 2022 and they were rolled out this year in 4 of our 5 disciplines. So therapy at this point, we do not have a refresher program in, but in the other 4 programs we do now. A notation for sonographers is it's geared towards generalist sonographers, not towards cardiac or echo sonographers. And we also have created some internationally educated programs so to help them do exam prep. These programs have all gone live in 2023, as well as the refresher programs and the international exam prep programs are now out with other stakeholders to see if they would like to adopt them. So with other regulators and other associations. We are also working in 2023 on some national initiatives with the Alliance. The Alliance is a body of all the MRT regulators in the country and sonography regulators as well in the country. We sit at one common table. We've also invited Sonography Canada to that table to work on basically a full review of what the process is for assessment of internationally educated applicants to ensure that what we are looking at is still warranted. So basically look at each criteria and say, does that stand? Why do we ask it? And if it does, that's fine. If we need more, then to do more, if we need to do less, or if we need to broaden out what we accept as proof. So we're just looking at every initiative, every one of those criteria separately. And we're also looking at other initiatives. One is an application has been put in for a grant. And if we get that grant, we'll use that money to look at national bridging programs as well. We've also hired for this summer a master student to do research around international applicants. So that person right now is looking at 7 identified countries, and they are reviewing what the pathway to work in those countries is as each of the 5 disciplines. And what we're looking to see is to determine if there's any countries that have substantively similar competency profile and standards of practice and scopes of practice. And also that they have some type of licensing body whereby those things are already checked in the country. And if we can determine that exists, so that we can say anyone coming from this country who belongs to this body, and that we already know they've already had all their education and exams and everything, that criteria checked, then we won't have to do that assessment piece, but they will still need to write and pass the national exam. So it would just take one step out for the international applicant, which would speed up the process and decrease the expense for them. And last but not least, we've also just signed on with an LMS and learning module system platform for the college. So we will take our refresher programs and our jurisprudence programs over the next couple of years, and we will actually move those into interactive learning online and to improve that experience for individuals taking those with us. This is just an example of the application guidebooks that we had mentioned that exist. So each one of these guidebooks is already linked on the website. So any applicant coming in, they can actually print out a hard copy PDF if they want of what the exact process is to apply for the college. Moving on to the second pillar, which would be effective governance. Effective governance in 2022, we did look at the terms of reference of each one of the committees and ensured that we were abiding by them. So in some cases, we needed some adjustments. In other cases, to the actual terms of references. In other cases, we needed to make some adjustments to how we were actually functioning as a committee to make sure we were meeting the terms of reference. We're now aligned and tracking the membership of all the committees to ensure that people who have met term conditions are not reoffering, and that we're getting new blood into committees where it's indicated. We've also we did a committee getting together a committee feedback survey. That initiative was delayed, but we're still working on that one to get better feedback on what's worked and what hasn't worked with the committees. In 2022, an executive committee selection process was developed by the nominations committee. So we have an executive of the board, which constitutes the chair, the vice chair, and the treasurer, and the secretary. And those three positions and what that selection process is within the board was developed by the nominations committee and approved in January of 2023 by the board. We also developed some staff guidebooks. So succession planning is an issue when you have a small staff like the college does. When somebody leaves from staff, they usually take a lot of knowledge with them. And given that we don't have duplication of roles, so someone coming in to replace them wouldn't have someone there readily able to train them. So we're creating staff books for each position, which would be fairly detailed on what the responsibilities are and how to fulfill those responsibilities. And that would hopefully help anyone transitioning into any role with the college. And the staff also did some Teams and SharePoint training education to better utilize the platform that we have. We've done now in 2023, we're lucky again with that student that we've hired this summer. They are working at creating team sites and everything for each of the committees to make committee communication more streamlined. In 2023, we just recently updated some bylaws with the board. So each year we do a bylaw review. This year we did some, just cleaned up some language where we found some typos, and the largest thing was we had within our bylaws honorary memberships and other categories that we just really didn't utilize, so they were removed. We've also looked at working at getting some committee standard operating procedures developed this year. And we're looking at onboarding process for the chairs. So trying to formalize that a little bit more this year. We have a skills matrix that our board fills out and our chairs fill out, but we don't really utilize it well as to help inform going forward what skill sets are lacking on the board and what skill sets we'd be searching for. So we want to really look at how do we do that better? How can we take that information that we have and utilize it in operations better? And we also are looking at role clarification on the board to ensure that everyone understands what their roles are. And then we're looking as well as board succession planning. So ensuring that as people transition in and off the board, that the board is stable in its governance. And this is just an example of one of the pages from the operational guides books that we have. So really where you go to do certain things. So it really how to use all the different software packages that the college utilizes for day-to-day business. Moving on to just some other areas of interest for the registrants and the other stakeholders is staffing. Our staffing in 22 stayed constant. So we hired again through a grant a summer student for 4 months, and the other 3 positions remained constant through that year. For 2023, we don't expect any difference in the executive director or the administrative assistant position. The deputy registrar right now is in the process of moving on to other opportunities. So we are actually in the process of posting that position, and that position will be posted for 20 hours a week. And we have the same this year for the summer students. We actually hired the 2 summer students instead of 1, and they're both again under grants. Fees, the board has reviewed fees for 2024. So we do that in the beginning of 2023 to decide to give registrants ample notification if there's going to be any change in fees. At this time, they have voted to keep fees at the same. So for 2024, your fees will remain at $450. So this will be the 8th year with no fee change. We did, however, the board did, however, look at some other fee changes, and so we are under development for a few things. Working without PLI policy is under development, will be effective in 2024. It's going to mirror, the fines will mirror what we do for working without a license. So going forward, effective in January 2024, there will likely be fines attached to working without proper professional liability insurance. The NHA's fee was increased to $70, and this is just to meet cost recovery of any fees that we would have to lay out related to an NSF. Sorry, that says NHS, but it should say F. And CPD extension requests. So this year we had 16 people request extensions on their CPD, and they were all granted. And definitely we use this as a learning experience. However, we also feel that now that we've gone through this first cycle, people should be more aware of what is expected. And while the fee while there will still be the opportunity to request the fee, there will be the opportunity to request an extension. There will be now a fee associated with that extension. And again, once that's developed, that will be the exact amount, and the exact policy will be disseminated out to the registrants. Professional conduct through 2022, we received 2 complaints this year that were acted upon. We received other inquiries, but we had 2 complaints that were actually filed and followed up with and investigated. One of those complaints is now resolved, and the one is still ongoing. We had 3 people through the year identified as working without a license, and obviously they had to cease working until they rectified that and paid any back dues and also fines related to that. So those fines range from $100 to $500. CPD extension, 97 audits were conducted and 16 extensions were granted. Of those 16 extensions that were granted, 15 complied and 1 person opted not to renew their license in the end. And PLI, so we had 6 people who did not, after, who had been given warnings for about a 6-week period, who had not renewed their PLI and had their insurance and had their license suspended until they were able to show evidence that they had professional liability insurance. All 6 were able to do that in less than a day and have their license reinstated. And that will be it. I'll turn it back to Chrissy.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. Are there any questions on the last few slides that Julie presented? We'll pause for a couple minutes and see if anyone has any questions. When is it Look like there's any questions coming through.
I do have a question. How do you decide who is audited for CPDs?
So
Melanie.
it's random. So two things that happen. The first thing that happens is the system looks for anyone who's non-compliant. So non-compliance is simply anyone that hasn't submitted their CPD. So it doesn't allow you to submit your CPD folio until you meet the criteria as outlined, that you have your required number of credits and your required percentage that are verifiable. So once you meet those two things, the system allows you to submit your CPD. In this case, we had 67 people who didn't submit. Now of those, a few of them actually had everything done. They just hadn't pressed submit, so the system didn't seem as complete. So that's the first stage that we do. We take anyone who's non-compliant. Now, if that number is less than 10% of our registrant pool, we also pull randomly from our registrants to bring it up to 10%. In this case, we didn't do any random selections because with the 90 something that were done, we were well over the 10%, which we expected the first time. It was, with learning and everything, we expected that. So this time, nobody was selected randomly.
And the machine would select, like the program itself selects them randomly.
Yeah, I have nothing to do. We just put in a number. Like, so if I needed, if I had 5% that were non-compliant and I needed another 5%, I would just stick in 5% and I'd get 5 names generated, and I'd have no control over who was generated. And yeah.
Any other questions?
No. Oh yes, sorry, they're all coming through now.
That's awesome.
Hamilton, why wasn't there more advocacy to get our retention bonus increased to the nurses? I heard us mentioned once on CTV Atlantic. It was a bit insulting.
Because we're not an advocacy group, we are a regulator, so we would not be involved in advocating for pay adjustments. However, advocacy would be through CMRT and CMRT Atlantic. So if you have questions about lack of advocacy, then those would be the parties you should be reaching out to and ask that question to.
Okay. Roberts, do you investigate if the CPD submitted are legitimate?
We have, so if there's any reason to believe someone, there's part of it's honor. So 50% of your credits need to be verifiable. So you need to have evidence of them. The other 50%, we do some on the honor system because there's also some recognition that you can take part in learning that isn't always easily proven. So that was the direction that the credentialing committee and the board had decided to go in. And so there is some trust put in there about the professionalism that you have as a registrant. If for any reason there is suspicion, we have the latitude to do a deeper dive into somebody's profile. And obviously, if someone was found to actually be lying, then that creates a bigger problem for them, because that now they're attesting to what they're doing as being truthful. So if if we find out that they've attested to something being truthful and they're falsifying documentation, that's a much bigger issue for them.
Okay, no more questions.
That's it. Maybe I'll pause for one more minute.
If anyone has questions outside of this, feel free to email us at any time and we'll be happy to answer them.
Definitely. No more questions?
No.
Okay, perfect. Okay, 5.0, annual reports. I'd like to thank everyone for their hard work in developing their annual reports this year. Sorry. Is there, can I get a motion to move to accept the reports en masse, excluding the financial reports?
I'll make that motion to accept the reports en masse.
Excellent, thanks, Kenny. Is there a seconder?
It's Lisa, I second the motion.
Perfect, thank you. It's moved and seconded to approve the reports en masse, excluding the financial reports. Are there any questions on the chair and executive director report, which is on page 6 and 7? And my next question is, are there any questions on the remaining reports, excluding the financials? So the registrar's report is on page 10, and the committee reports are page 18 to 23, sorry. No questions coming through?
No, no questions.
We can launch the next voting poll then. The question is to accept the reports en masse, excluding the financial reports. So everyone just please vote once the poll appears on your screen.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll.
Awesome, motion carried. So the next section, 5.3, is the financials. So you'll find the audited financial statements also in the handouts tab to the right of your screen. And I'd like to now invite Monita Taylor from MNP to present the audited results for the college for 2022. So these audited financial statements have already been presented to the board and approved in the May board meeting. And Monita, take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Chrissy, and thank you everyone for having MNP join the meeting today to present the financial results. Included in your package would have been our auditor's report. So you will see that this is what we call a clean, unqualified audit report, which means that in our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with the Canadian accounting standards for not-for-profit organizations. So this is what we consider a very good report. On the statement of financial position, which is being presented on the screen right now, you'll note that overall the assets of the organization have increased about $53,000 over prior year. This is mainly because of an increase in cash, decrease in your investments, and an increase in capital assets. Cash has increased because of cash generated from operating activities. And then some of that cash from operating activities was used to purchase capital assets. So down in your long-term assets, you'll see that capital assets have increased. And that's because there were additions to Guild for the exam platform and other enhancements of about $40,000. And then capital assets are amortized each year as they're being used. And so that amortization is based on accounting policies that have been set for the organization. Investments, which are outlined in note 5 to the financial statements, are recorded at fair market value. And I'm sure, as everyone knows on the call today, fair value for investments was down at the end of 2022. However, a part of what we do in our audit process is look at further impairment of investments, and we look at investment statements after year end. And for the first quarter of 2023, investments were starting to improve. So the value was increasing again for the 2023 year. Then down in the liabilities, overall liabilities have increased by about $14,000 over last year. And this is largely because some of the enhancements that happened in the capital assets, there was government assistance that was received to do those enhancements. And that government assistance is amortized into revenue over the life of the assets. And then the bottom part of this statement is the net assets, which breaks the the net assets of the organization over the different funds. And the funds are outlined in note 2 to the financial statements. And we'll look a little bit more at what makes up that breakdown as we move to the next page. So now on your screen is the statement of operations, and you'll notice that this statement is in what we call the columnar format. So each column shows the operating activities of the fund. So we have the operating fund, special project fund, and contingency fund. Then we have the total for 2022 compared to the total of 2021. So overall in revenues, stayed fairly consistent year over year. The makeup of revenues have changed a little bit where your registration fees have increased, but government grants that were received for special projects in 2021, there were none in operating activities this year. Down in expenditures, expenses have increased by about 26,000 over the prior year. Some things that jump out is the consulting fees, which you'll see is expensed in your contingency fund, and an increase in salaries and conferences. And those would be expenses that we would see generally increasing for all organizations right now as things are going back to not entirely virtual anymore. So more costs associated with some of those activities. Overall, the organization had an excess of revenue over expenses from operating activities of about 58,000. And then we get down into other items, and in other items is where you see the loss on the investments this year. You'll see that there was a loss on the fair value of the investments of about 25,000. So bottom line, the organization has excess of revenues over expenses of about 39,000. And that 39,000 is what we then take and allocate to the different funds of the organization, which is on our next page. Whoever's in control is on it today. So this is our statement of changes in net assets. And again, this is in the columnar format. We do have an extra fund shown here, which is the operational reserve fund. And the reason it wasn't on the statement of operations is because there wasn't any activity in the year. So in this statement, we take where your assets started, your net assets started with this year. Then we allocate the revenues and expenses between the funds based on what the activity related to. And then we do a transfer between the funds because we don't leave any net assets in the operating fund. The operating fund is meant to generate income to help build the different funds. So the operational reserve fund is set at a cap of 150,000. You'll see after the allocation this year, it's sitting at 128,000. That cap is based on an estimate of about 6 months of operating activities. The special projects fund is capped at 50,000, and you'll see as funds were used this year, it was ramped back up to the 50,000. And then the contingency fund is capped at 500,000, and you'll see after the allocation this year, it's sitting at 363,000. Those caps, there's also minimums for each fund, and as I noted before, those are all outlined in note 2 to the financial statements, and also lets the readers know the purpose of those different funds. And here we have the statement of cash flows. So in the statement of cash flows, I'm just going to go to the subtotals. As I mentioned before, your first subtotal there is the is the net of the operating cash flows for the year. So operating activities generated just over 87,000, and that operating cash flow was used to purchase capital assets. So we have a net increase in cash resources of about 47,000 this year. And that's broken down between cash that's sitting in the operating account and then cash that's sitting in marketable securities. And that's outlined at the bottom of this page. For the rest of the financial statements, we've outlined the notes. And in the notes to the financial statements, the first part takes us through the significant accounting policies. And those policies that were used to record the activities for 2022 were consistent with the policies that were used in previous years. That was really it for my summary of the financial statements, but I'm open to taking any questions that anyone might have.
That was perfect. Thank you, Manita. But yeah, we'll definitely pause for a few minutes and see if there are any questions. And I know that those pages that you're seeing are pretty small, but this platform allows you to kind of move around your screen if you would like, and you can slide the gray bar up or down like underneath the videos so that you can see the financial documents a little bit closer, and you can always like mess with your own Zoom on your own desktop, if that makes sense. Are there any questions coming through, Joanne?
No, I haven't got any questions. Oh, no. That always happens when I say we haven't got any questions and one pops up. Williams, once we reach the 150k for the reserve fund, how will the funds then be allocated?
So that's a great question. And I think the 150,000 you're referring to is the operational reserve fund. And obviously this is up to your executive and your board. But one thing I will note is that the organization is pretty conservative in the balance that it's building towards in the operational reserve fund. As costs have increased, some organizations have moved to 12 months to 18 months of anticipated operating expenses in a reserve fund. So that's something for the organization to consider. And I think we talked about this at when I presented the financial statements to the board as well. I'll let Julie chime in as well.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on once we cap, you know, as Manita just said, there's always every year can be the board can review our policies and they may change what that cap is. So that's one thing. And definitely as costs go up, we can expect at some point in time that cap will move. But additionally, say we are at the top, that money we look at doing alternative investment with that's in fairly low risk investment, just so that we try to get it to work for us. But the intent of that 150,000 reserve fund is if for some reason as an organization we had to shut down and we basically had no more revenues coming in, but we still had financial obligations to meet, that money is there to make sure that we're able to shut down shop and pay any outstanding contractual obligations we have. So it would just sit there in preparation for that.
Mm-hmm. And we do have policies in place for like what percentage of any extra monies go into the other reserve funds. So it's very well laid out in policies. But yeah, the caps can always move.
Right. The intent is that if there was ever these different funds, the intent is that if there was a reason for an emergency situation, that the costs have already been absorbed over many years rather than one pool of registrants having to bear it all.
Right. Any other questions coming through, Joanne?
No, so that's it. Just thank you from Williams. I think you've answered a question for her.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Manita, for your time today. We can let you get back to your weekend unless you had something else.
Okay. That's it. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone and that we really appreciate working with the college.
Awesome. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. So now Julie Avery, our Director and Registrar, will now present the 2022 variance analysis and the 2023 budget. Julie?
There we go. Okay. So just to sort of bring it attention, because I know the registrants and other stakeholders like to see sort of how we're budgeting versus what actually happens. So we wanted to put our budget against the actuals for the year. And we can see here, so I'm just going to highlight the ones that where there's really a lot of differences. Amortization, it was almost twice what we had budgeted, and that was because of that whole piece that Manita was talking about, where we capitalize improvements to the registration platform. When we did the budget for last year, we hadn't obviously finished completing the audit, and in the audit process, they suggested that be capitalized. So there's a disjoint there, and we can expect that our amortization will stay up there for the next few years. AGM expenses, we had it as billed, it's $5,500. That was because we used to, again, the speaker that we had before this AGM, we used to put that into the AGM expense, and doing a review of how we allocating some of the expenses. Really, that didn't belong there because it's not part of the AGM. It's a plenary session that we do before the AGM. And so that the speaker fees have now been reclassified into registrant education. And so and again, so the only really fees we have are direct AGM fees now. The next one, sorry, let me see. National representation, we did expect to go back to full in-person events this year, and to some degree that was true, but not as frequent. So one body that used to have 3 live meetings a year is only now having 1 live meeting, and only had 1 live meeting in 2022. Also, our chair wasn't able to attend the meeting that we did go to, so expenses were far less than we anticipated. Investment management fees, we now have a few years of trending, so we in the past haven't, because they're very difficult to find until you do a squeezing out at the end of the year. But now that we've had a few years and we can see some trending, we are running around $4,000 each year. So in the future, you will actually see us start budgeting that item. Office expenses, we were looking at moving, so we had budgeted a large amount for actually having to purchase some office equipment and some other expenses related to moving. And in the end, we stayed put, so we didn't realize those expenses. The audit fee is a lot higher for two reasons. One, there's 5 years of tax returns in there because we had received some improper advice around the need to file an information return, and we hadn't been filing information returns prior to 2020. So we had to go back and do information returns for a number of years, and we had MMP do that for us. So that was an additional cost. And the other additional cost is we've had some struggles with our accounts payable, receivable, the third party that does that, and some of the way they're reporting, and that has created some extra issues in cleaning up some documents to get ready for the audit, which cost us more as well. So we're working on trying to clean that up, and if we can't clean that up, then we actually look at switching our AP/AR provider. Special projects. Yeah, we didn't do much in here. The special projects is sort of different because we actually allocated a lot of money to Guild, but in the end, it doesn't show up here because that ended as an asset instead, because we did the amortization. So instead of showing up on this line now, it goes into an asset, and it doesn't show up as a real expense. So even though we spent 30-odd thousand, it doesn't actually show up here in special projects. It shows up as an asset that we then we see as an amortization expense over the next few years. Public relations, we had planned on having stuff rolled out. We have been behind because they've been busy and because we've been busy. So we've definitely, the project has not gone at the speed that we had hoped. So we're a little bit behind in that. So we can expect to see these costs basically transferred into 2023. And that's it. So overall, we end up spending 17,000 less than what we had budgeted to expect. To actually, by this 17,000 less, but if you actually incorporate the 30-odd thousand paid into Guild for upgrades it went into, we actually spent more than what we budgeted. So we had a projected surplus of only $7,800, and we ended up actually would have been in a deficit. We would have actually spent 10,000 more than that, but because 30,000 went into assets, we ended up with extra, and then we obviously had about 20 some odd thousand extra in income that we hadn't budgeted for. So overall, we're still in a good, healthy position. What we are seeing obviously over time is that the difference between the action, it's getting tighter over time. We're definitely not seeing the surpluses of before, in part because we're getting back to normal functions, and also because in part we're having increased costs. And actually, before I turn over back to Chrissy and questions, I do want to bring up one thing I should have brought up in my executive summary earlier that I missed, and I forgot to. Important point was we have a new act passed in the province called Patient Access to Care Act. It was passed about a month ago, and it has a direct impact on regulators. For us, right off the bat, the impact is that anyone coming from another jurisdiction who's licensed in another jurisdiction, we can't charge any fees to in their first year, and we can't, and we have to have their license approved within 5 days of completed application. So those two things came into immediate effect when it passed. There is in the process, we expect that to cost about $10,000 to a budget line each year. However, the government is in the process of developing an MOU so that they will reimburse any costs that we would have collected that we aren't able to collect. The act will go further than that. The regulations are not written for the act yet, but over the next year, we expect even more regulations to come into effect under that act. And some of those regulations will definitely impact things around recognizing other jurisdictions and theoretically, depending on what regulations are written, it could impact what criteria we're allowed to ask or not ask. But we won't know that till those regulations come into effect. The other thing that we are working on under that act is that you may have heard about already is the College of Medical Laboratory Technologists is looking under this act to license CLXT. So we'll be working with them. And so it is expected that in the next year, we may see CLXTs licensed in the province, which is our combined laboratory X-ray technologists. In addition, in the fall, we expect a new act to be brought to the House, which would over time replace all. There'll be one healthcare act for all health regulation in the province, so it would replace our act and we'd be under that. But the exact implications of that we will not know until it comes down as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, those are a couple important points for sure. Joanna, are there any questions for Julie?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions. Williams, what were the consultant fees for?
Consultant fees, that's your contingency. So as I said, we had 2 complaints this year that we investigated. So we hire a third party to do our investigations. It would also be any legal fees. So basically anything to do with the complaints process would go under that contingency area and consultants fees. So we don't do our own investigations. It would be too difficult to have the skill set maintained for the number of investigations we do, and the conflicts that would arise with our small population, it would be difficult as well. So we had them do 2. One of the investigations is fairly complex. So it's still underway, and most of those expenses are related to that one complaint, and we can expect that to easily be that much or more this year.
Okay, thank you. And then Melanek, why is there a discrepancy in salary?
Oh, well, we have, Jacqueline came on during last year, so that would have increased our salary pool at that point when budgeted. So the deputy registrar position started in the spring of 2022.
Okay, Samson, combined tech license, is it for existing workers or future employees?
It would be, you would have to, we can't get into this total minutia of that yet because the act hasn't, the regulations and everything accompanying that haven't passed, but there would be specific criteria. There is recognized education for CLXTs, recognized exams. So that would all be laid out, but it would be for the class, a specific class of people called CLXTs, and they would have to meet the requirements of what education and exams are laid out for CLXTs.
So it could be for both incoming that are already educated, or it's an opportunity for.
Yes, so there are no CLXTs working in the province because they can't, because both MLT and X-ray are protected areas of practice. So at this point, if there's a CLXT in the province, they're not working as a CLXT.
Okay. Oh, every time I say okay, another question comes through. Hamilton, why wasn't there more advocacy? Oh, you've already asked that question. Why is that flipped? Apologies.
That's okay.
My screen just flashed and moved. No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe we'll wait one more minute to see if there's any other questions on the finances before we move on.
Yeah.
We're getting so close. Okay, hearing no more questions. Let's move on to 6.0. I know the screen says closure, but we're not there yet. So close, but not yet. 6.1, the election results. So
yes.
A call for nominations was sent out in November of 2022 for 2 vacant positions on the board for 2023. Excuse me. Rebecca Jessam and Kenny Zan re-offered, and these were the only names put forth for the 2 vacant positions, so therefore they were acclaimed. We'd like to welcome Rebecca and Kenny back to the board, now serving on their 2nd term, which commenced in February of this year. 6.2, appointment of accounting firm. The NSC MIRTP Finance Committee has made the recommendations to the board for the continued appointment of the firm of MNP to perform a financial audit for the 2023 fiscal year. The board voted and approved on this motion at a recent board meeting. All right, 7.0, closure. Thank you all for attending and for your participation. I would like to thank Brian Baxter from McGinnis Cooper and everyone else for their assistance today. I declare this 3rd annual general meeting of the Nova Scotia College of Medical Imaging and Radiation Therapy Professionals closed. 12:05. Sorry?
That's good. Can you invite Ryan to stay?
Yeah, I was going to say I would now like to move into the next portion of today's webinar, and that is an open question answer period. Brian, are you okay to stay for this next little portion in case there are any legal questions?
Yes, of course. Happy to, Chrissy. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So for those just joining this portion of our meeting, I'd like to review quickly how the questions will be asked and addressed during this session. So due to the number of individuals online, all mics have been muted except for those for the board and staff. If you have a question, please enter, make sure your last name appears at the beginning of your question, just for minutes purposes. If it's a long question, please type incoming so that we know to wait for your full question. The total time required to read the question must not exceed 3 minutes. And we recommend pre-typing your questions into a Word document and then just copying and pasting. Questions may not be answered in the order in which they are received, and identical questions may be grouped together. And also, we will not be using the raise hand function during this meeting. Questions will be read aloud and will be answered by a board member, executive director, or committee chair as appropriate. We encourage individuals to bring forth any questions or concerns they have and are reminded to phrase it in a concise, professional manner. Questions containing profanity, personal attacks, or that are otherwise unprofessional will not be addressed. The draft minutes of this AGM, as well as the transcript of this Q&A forum, will be posted on the website within 30 days. Joanne, go ahead with the first question, please.
I haven't got anything yet.
I guess I just put it out there just that they can ask a question on anything. This is open. So you're not tied to what was covered in the AGM. So if you have any questions at all, you can ask them.
That's right. So what are you guys talking about in the lunchrooms?
Yeah.
You still have quite a lot of people online. I'm very pleased to see that we still have about 111 people, so that's awesome. Thank you for hanging in with us this morning.
Yeah, I'd say that attendance for this regulator is pretty exceptional. I attend a lot of AGMs this time of year, and sometimes there's only a handful of folks, so it's just great to see how engaged the membership of this college is.
Yes, I'm always pleased at the turnout since we've gone virtual. Definitely much better since we've gone virtual.
Any questions yet, Joanne?
No.
So, okay.
Lunchtime.
Oh, oh yeah, they're coming in now. Here they come.
Awesome.
Okay, so this is from Fader. What are the implications to MRT practice of regulation of CLXTs?
That's a good question.
Again, until we actually get to the minutia and see the act and everything, it's a little hard to be specific. We really shouldn't, for MRTs, it really shouldn't impact. It would be sort of an indirect in that you would be working alongside CLXTs and how that, what that looks like and responsibility levels. So if a CLXT is licensed, they will have their own standards of practice, they'll have their own competency profile, they will have their own accountability to the MLT college. Our college is working in close conjunction. So just to assure people that when the MLT college is making decisions around the radiography portion of their practice, they are consulting with us. We will have a MOU in place around what that will look like in the long term. But definitely I'm being invited to meetings and I'm being everything that any documents that they're making, they're sharing with the college right now. So they are being 100% collaborative in the process. But we're looking at this point without, again, holding me 100% to this because this is not finalized by any means. You're basically looking for the radiography portion of practice, I can't comment on the MLT portion of practice, is you're basically looking at them doing plain film x-ray, right? What used to be called plain film x-ray as their entry standard. Exact procedures and everything will be outlined when we get further down that road. And it's going out, like the MLT college has to reach out to all stakeholders in this, so they'll be reaching out to employers and everything, and giving people a chance to give their opinions, comments, concerns, support to this, so that basically all stakeholders will have a chance to weigh in on it and have that as part of the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. Healy, any talk of Sonography Canada accepting NSCMI RTPs, registration and credits?
You'd have to talk for Sonography Canada to accept our credits.
Yeah, is there any talk about it?
That would be, yeah, we would not be, Sonography Canada hasn't reached out to us for anything on that level. So my understanding is that the Sonography Canada, they do have a continuing professional development program of their own. And what they've done is, if you are a sonographer working in Nova Scotia, licensed in Nova Scotia, when you go in there, all you need to do is check some document or page saying that you're doing CPD through us. And once you do that, you don't need to be uploading it into their portal. But you do need to be prepared that if they audit you, that you would be able to present what you've done. But you don't have to be recording it in two places. That is my understanding. But they're an association, so we wouldn't be changing. I mean, we'll work with them, but we wouldn't be changing our standards to their standards. So that we have our standards set. And yeah, so I don't, because we don't have any set credit system. That's the other thing, right? So they definitely will take credits that you've earned for our CPD. Whether they take them all carte blanche, I don't know. You'd have to look at the specifics of the criteria for their program.
Thank you. Fair. What are the 2 professional misconduct complaints regarding, and how serious are they?
I can't give you specifics. I can tell you they both have to do with professional conduct, and that one was informally resolved and the other one is still ongoing. So, you know, due to, unless something goes to a professional conduct panel that becomes public, until that process, join the investigation process, all of this is confidential, right? So I can give you what it relates to as to what standard. So it's professional conduct.
Thank you. Judre, sorry if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Has the association considered any enticement for retirees to return to work where there is such a shortage in the workforce, such as lower fees and less CPD credits?
First, I'd just like to correct, we're a college, not an association. So that right there changes the lens of what we would look at. So from our standard, lens, we're looking at standards for practice. So if you look at fees, the cost of having you as a registrant is the same whether you work 1 day licensed or we're still, a lot of the costs really are the same. So we wouldn't be looking at reducing fees. There is, a locum, like a short-term license fee for 3 months, but that would be it. So, but if you're licensing for more than 3 months, you pay the full amount. The other question around CPD, again, we will be doing a full CPD review because we've now gone through a full cycle. We're doing a full CPD review in July. Any registrant that wants, and we've asked for it before, but again, I'll ask for it here. If there's any feedback that you want to share with us on the CPD program or any aspect of it, please email us because we'll incorporate that into our review. And then we'll be taking our review to the credentialing committee, and any changes would be then the credentialing committee can make any recommendations to changes to the board. As it stands now, the number of credits required is about remaining engaged in the profession. So regardless whether you're working one shift or a shift every single day, we want you to be engaged in the profession, and the public that is using your services expects the same level of competency regardless whether you're casual or full-time. So if we're looking at continuing professional development, I think if there's any argument to be made around number of credits required, you could actually argue casuals need more, not less, because they're not in the workforce, interacting in the environment and getting access to as much as what a full-timer is. So at this point in time, there is no plans on reducing the number of CPD credit requirements. Again, everything's under review this summer, so there could be changes to that.
Okay, thank you. Hopkin, can the slides from the first presentation be made available to share to friends and family?
No, we did ask. So when we get a presenter in, we need to abide by what they have for level of sharing. It wasn't recorded either, so there's no ability to go back and hear it. So it's their proprietary information, and so unfortunately, no, we won't be able to share it.
Okay. Just some feedback from Samson. Online platforms definitely remove attendance barriers, so thank you. And that's it at the minute.
Awesome. Those are good questions.
Mm-hmm.
We'll wait a couple more minutes. People are thinking.
Oh, here we go. Judre, has the association considered any enticement?
You did that one.
Questions keep repeating themselves.
Yeah, you did that
one. Right. Malinek, can the time increments on the CPD portfolio be adjusted to 30-minute intervals? Not all sessions are posted, example half-day training or in-service sessions.
It depends on what category you're in, right? So there are lots of things that are so if you're doing webinar or if you're doing lunch and learns, things like that, they're already put in it for 30-minute sessions. But there's certain things that are like their half-day learning. You go to a workshop for a half-day, that's how it's scheduled. It's a morning workshop. So that's why we just called it that. So really when you look at your CPD, just look at the different categories, and if you hover your mouse right by the name of the category, it really gives additional information on what would belong there. And you pick what, for the most part, you pick what aligns best with the activity that you're doing. There's no way that anything can capture every type of activity that's out there. So if it really doesn't fit in any category, by all means, reach out to us. And we did have a couple of those, obviously. But the vast majority of people that reach out saying, where does this belong? There's already a category for it. You just need to say where it fits best. So every time someone develops something new, we don't need an email saying, well, I'm going, there's this new LMS course, where does it land? Well, it's an LMS course, so it's a webinar, so it's how many hours is it? And it will calculate it so for you, whether it's, and if it's a bigger program, then you put it under a short study versus if it's a 1 hour webinar. But if it's multiple modules that you're going to do over a few hours, we might put it under a short study course or something. So really try to take a look and see if there's something where it seems to fit and align well. Because we're not about micromanaging. We do trust that most of you can judge that, and we're fine with you making educated decisions around that.
Carrying on from that a little bit, McHugh, how early can we submit our CPD if we have filled the 30 credits?
You can submit it right away. I would ask that you don't, though, because what we found is people that submit it right away, we frequently then got an email saying, I want to change something in it, and it costs us a half an hour they charge us a half hour tech time, which we're trying to deal with on a different level. But we would ask that really, there's no need to submit it in advance, way in advance. So leave it open so that you have the latitude to go change something if you want to change it. And if it's due October 31st of 2024, the next one, I think, don't submit it till September. I wouldn't submit it till like the month before type thing. That way it just gives you the option of changing it up. But there's nothing to prevent you from submitting it tomorrow. But then you'll not be able to access it at all without us reopening it.
Right, Amiro, would anyone happen to know if the cyclotron will become regulated by the college in the future?
There's already a position statement out on that around Nuke MedTech's working down there. So there's the board's, the college's stance that Nuke MedTech's working down in the cyclotron should be licensed. So.
Okay, we've just had some thank yous from Fader, and thank you to the staff and volunteer board for their ongoing efforts ensuring the good work and viability of the college.
I was going to add something to the question about the CPD. I think the example was specifically like a half day or full day training. If you feel like it was less than a half day for, I think is what your example was, then I think you can just manually choose like half of the half day credits. Is that right? Because I know you can do that for conferences. You can manually type in, I went to 8 lectures, so I'm claiming 8. So I think you can do the same for training, like if it wasn't quite a half day.
Or you can put it into lunch and learn and just make it a longer lunch and learn type thing.
Right.
So there's other ways you can manipulate too. Yeah. So again, if you can find a place where it fits, we get that everything is not 100% line up, but if you can see something that pretty much lines up with the rationale of what you're doing and the credits, then we're fine with that. And if we see misplaced, I mean, we don't, obviously, we got this, some people had disallowed and they said, well, I know somebody else who has this and they didn't get audited, so theirs was okay. Well, there's no way we can look at the 750 people in depth, just too time intense. Again, like I said, if we had a rationale or a knowing that somebody's being dishonest, we would look into it. But just being, honestly misplacing something and things like that, that is going to happen. It's part of the process. But when we were doing the audits, we definitely found people who were clearly misplacing things into you know, something that was worth, you know, lunch and learn, putting it into a full credit course. So one's worth 1 credit and one's worth 15 credits. We're obviously going to disallow that.
I'm not sure if this was just covered. Melanex says there is no free text option to adjust the time.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think there is, but that's where, as I was saying, if it's, yeah, I don't think you can there. In other categories, you can. What you can change is the length of time you spent in something, but a half day is a half day. So if you didn't spend a whole half day doing something, then I would think it probably, you could go into like a lunch and learn instead and stick it under there and just broaden out the time from an hour to 2 hours.
That makes sense. Any other questions?
Not at the moment. Oh, Amiro, just to clarify, are there regulations around non-nuke med techs in the cyclotron?
No, not at this time.
I want to give it one more minute. It's 12:24. We'll round it up.
I think this is our longest AGM ever.
That's awesome. All right. No more questions coming through, Joanne?
No, but as soon as I say that, one flashes up.
Exactly. So yeah, as we've mentioned, you can always email us at info@nscmirtp.ca at any time with any of your questions or comments.
And Joanne is, we'll be sending out credit certificates for people for their CPD. Please give her a couple weeks before you email us looking for them. She has obviously over 100 of them to do, and that's in addition to her normal work. So yeah, just give her a couple of weeks. If you don't get something within a couple of weeks, please do reach out to her. Another thing I would say, since I have 100 of you online, we are going to be testing our jurisprudence module. We're using, it's live right now, but we're moving it to an LMS system. So we're going to be doing some testing of it. It's not mandatory for registrants to do it at this point in time, but if there's a registrant that wants to do it, it is worth a successfully completion of the jurisprudence module is you get a certificate that's 2 CPD credits. So emails if you're interested in trying it out and helping us test it out, the new system. Just to the info line, and then we'll put you in the list of people once we switch the test over to the LMS system.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the extra second or two. Still no questions, Joanne?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Thank you, Ryan, for staying on with us. And thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye now.
Bye.